Hello everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about Session 9. Session 9 is going to be focused on a bit more of historical info versus the philosophical info that Ra prefers to talk about, but Dawn does try to keep it relevant. We're going to talk about third density and the transfer of souls from Mars to Earth, which is what started our third density. And yeah, we'll just go ahead and jump right in. I am Ra. I greet you in the love and the light of our infinite Creator. We communicate now. Questioner. We are definitely going to make the Law of One the primary portion of this book. I apologize for getting sidetracked on these subjects. We're in the position of, shall we say, beating around as to what direction to go with the book to begin with. For this reason, I have asked a few questions, and will probably ask a few more questions in the early part of these sessions that will be somewhat meaningless with respect to the application of the Law of One because my own ignorance of what I'm doing. However, I expect to become more proficient rapidly while we go on. There are a couple of questions that are probably meaningless, but if I could get them out of the way, they're bothering me a little bit. Is it possible for you to suggest a publisher for this book? I am Ra. No. And that's the first question. And I understand why Dawn would ask this question. It kind of makes sense, and Ra just cannot do that because it would alter their future decisions, and that's not something that Ra can do. If they already had a publisher and they came to Ra and said, hey, is this publisher okay? I think Ra would probably be able to confirm or deny. Probably just confirm if they've already made the decision, because again, if they denied it, then they would change their future. But Ra can't tell them who to go to as a publisher. That's work that they're going to have to do on their own. So, 9.2. Questioner. Is it possible for you to tell us of anything in our past incarnations, our past experiences before this incarnation? I am Ra. It is possible. However, such information as this is carefully guarded by your mind, body, spirit, being totality, so that your present space-time experiences will be undiluted. Let us scan for harmless material for your beingness. I am, in the distortion of desire for your freedom from preconception, able to speak only generally. There have been several times when this group worked and dwelt together. The relationships varied. There is balanced karma, as you call it. Each thus the teacher of each. The work has involved healing, understanding the uses of the earth energy, and work in aid of civilizations which called, just as your sphere has done and we have come. This ends the material which we consider harmless. So, again, it's very understandable why Dawn would ask this question, and I think Ra's pretty generous in giving them an answer. First, they say that our mind, body, spirit, being totality guards this information. So I think that's important to remember that this is an intentional part of the veil, is to protect us from the awareness of our past incarnations, so that this incarnation can be its own isolated experience without getting too focused on things that may have happened in the past, without a complete understanding of why those things happened in the past. We have planned our incarnations, and we have set up karmic engagements and different experiences and events that may be dependent upon our previous incarnations. But while we're veiled and we get some sort of glimpse of our past incarnations, that can just lead to more confusion about what our purpose is in this life and what we actually want to accomplish with this life experience. So the mind, body, spirit, being totality is the seventh density self. It's the self that creates the higher self. The higher self is a thought form that is created by the mind, body, spirit, being totality, the seventh density self, as a resource for the incarnated self. So essentially, the higher self, and even beyond the higher self, protects this information from us. So if you think, because I've seen this many times before, that your higher self is feeding you information about your past incarnations, I would challenge you to challenge that contact and challenge that information, because it's not very likely that the higher self is going to give you detailed, explicit information about past lives, because for the previously stated reasons. So sometimes you see that where people are channeling their higher self, and their higher self tells them that they were so-and-so, and that they did this and this, or they had visions of this and this. And I'm not saying that it's impossible to receive specific visions or dreams about past lives, but I think you should always take them with a grain of salt and keep them in the proper proportion, and remember that this is the life experience that you're supposed to be focused on. And it can really get kind of dramatic and distracting. And, sometimes people get a strong resonance with important historical figures, that maybe they were this person in their past life. I can tell you that I've had multiple people come to me telling me that they believe that they are the reincarnation of Dawn. And things like this can just become a really intense distraction from what you're supposed to be doing today, right now. And so, yeah, again, like I said, take it with a grain of salt, keep it in perspective, and know that after this incarnation, you'll get all of that information about your past lives. That information is there. You will eventually receive it. It is really exciting to think about, and the potential of getting that information right now might be very stimulating, but it is there for you to eventually receive. And this lifetime is supposed to be its own thing. So what Ross says then is that the group has worked together many times. They have balanced karma, as we call it. So each is the teacher of each. Nobody is like a teacher of the other, and the other's a student, without there being a reciprocation of that energy. And they said that the group has done work in aiding of civilizations which called just as your sphere has done, and we have come. So I believe that's Ra affirming that they have been wanderers before to other planets that have called for help, and now that's what they're doing here, is basically the same thing. They've wandered here because of the call, and they're trying to help. In the Book 5 material that is attached to this session, since they removed this question, 9.2, and a few others, Carla mentions that they did have a past life reading done, and so I'll just go ahead and read that paragraph, because it sort of does describe maybe a more recent past life of the group that helped them prepare for this life and balance their karma. Carla says, "Both Donald and Jim had a loving and generous regard of me that is amazing unless one introduces the concept of previous connections. I have no doubt that we have served together before, in other lives and other times. An interesting bit of possible past history was expressed years ago to Jim in a psychic reading. It was suggested that in the American Great Plains frontier of the 19th century, Don and Jim were brothers living together as farmers. I was Jim's child, Don's nephew, and I lived only to the age of 5, being sickly from birth. This was suggested as being preparation for their taking care of me in this life, as I dealt with disability, limitation, and especially psychic reading during the time of the raw contact. It rings true at some level with me. However, I also feel that we do not need to know anything of our past associations in order to learn and serve together at this present moment. We have all we need to meet the present moment. The rest is just details." The next question, 9.3. Questioner, the healing exercises that you gave to us are of such a nature that it is best to concentrate on a particular exercise at a time. I would like to ask at this time what exercise I should concentrate on. Possibly a little exercise change. Should I concentrate on inaudible, say tonight? I am Ra. Again, to direct your judgment is an intrusion upon your space-time continuum distortion called future. To speak of past or present within our distortion judgment limits is acceptable. To guide rather than to teach-learn is not acceptable to our distortion in regards to teach-learning. We instead can suggest a process whereby each chooses the first of the exercises given in the order in which we gave them, which you, in your discernment, feel is not fully appreciated by your mind-body-spirit complex. This is the proper choice, building from the foundation, making sure the ground is good for the building. We have assessed for you the intensity of this effort in terms of energy expended. You will take this in mind and be patient, for we have not given a short or easy program of consciousness learn teaching. So here Don is trying to, let's say, maximize efficiency. And Ra is saying that that's not really the way to approach doing these healing exercises and to integrate these lessons in consciousness, and that by their very nature, they're going to take a lot of time. And so they ask Don to be patient in accepting of that all of this is meant to take a long time. Exploring the mind, balancing the mind, that takes a lot of time and energy and effort. And so trying to find shortcuts or skipping certain parts isn't necessarily going to end up with the best outcome. So Ra basically says, you have to decide for yourself whether or not you think each step is important. We essentially did give you sequential steps. So you can take them in sequence and do them in order. Or if you really feel like you don't need some of the first steps, you can skip some of the first steps and move on to the next steps. But really that you should just surrender to the fact that this is going to take a long time. And you should probably at least try to engage with all of the steps. So, 9.4. Questioner. The way I understand the process of evolution of a planetary population is that a population has a certain amount of time to progress. This is generally divided into 3 25,000-year cycles. At the end of the 75,000 years, the planet progresses itself. What caused this situation to come about? Preciseness of the years, 25,000 years, etc. What set this up to begin with? I am Ra. Visualize, if you will, the particular energy which, outward flowing and inward coagulating, formed the tiny realm of the creation governed by your Council of Saturn. Continue seeing the rhythm of this process. The living flow creates a rhythm which is as inevitable as one of your timepieces. Each of your planetary entities began the first cycle when the energy nexus was able in that environment to support such mind-body experiences. Thus, each of your planetary entities is on a different cyclical schedule, as you might call it. The timing of these cycles is a measurement equal to a portion of intelligent energy. This intelligent energy offers a type of clock. The cycles move as precisely as a clock strikes your hour. Thus, the gateway from intelligent energy to intelligent infinity opens, regardless of circumstance, on the striking of the hour. So here, I believe essentially what Ra is saying is that the Council of Saturn starts the clock when it's time, when it's possible for mind-body-spirit complexes to begin incarnating on the planet. As we go on here with the rest of the session, we find out that this started on our sphere when the Martians began incarnating on our planet. And then once that time starts, it's essentially like an hourglass. They flip the hourglass 25,000 years. Flip the hourglass again, 25,000 years. The third time of the 25,000 years, at the end, when the last grain of sand falls, that's when the gateway to intelligent infinity opens. That's when the planet moves into fourth density. That's when the harvest of all of the third density entities on this planet occurs, whether the beings are ready to go forward into fourth density or not. So it's a precision thing. There isn't anything that we can do as a peoples that can change that. Which, as I think about it, makes me wonder if that isn't why we have, say, the instance of beings from third density who have come here, who are more further technologically advanced than us. Like, they've moved quite far in technology in those 75,000 years, but their actual harvest hasn't occurred yet. So they still have to allow the planet to reach that striking of the hour that moves all of them into fourth density. Just something that I considered right now that I don't know if I've ever considered before. But yeah, essentially the time is set, and at the end, that's when the planet is fourth density. So third density, a very, very short little blip in the progression of a planetary sphere. Question 9.5, Dawn asks, the original, the first entities on this planet. What was their origin? Where were they before they were on this planet? I am Ra. The first entities upon this planet were water, fire, air, and earth. So that's the first density. Those are the first density beings. That's what a first density planet has, are those four things that are teaching and learning from each other how to evolve, to progress, and to understand and develop the concept of time. Because in first density, there isn't the concept of time yet. So that concept has to be developed on the planetary sphere before second density can start incarnating. 9.6, Dawn asks, the people that we now have, the first people, like us, where did they come from? How did they evolve? I am Ra. You speak of third density experience. The first of those to come here were brought from another planet in your solar system called by you the red planet, Mars. This planet's environment became inhospitable to third density beings. The first entities, therefore, were of this race, as you may call it, manipulated somewhat by those who were guardians at that time. And so, here we have Ross saying the first beings who came to our planet were Martians. Their planet was no longer hospitable, so they essentially, because they destroyed their planet, started their third density over here on Earth, and guardians brought them here and genetically manipulated them. We get a lot more details about that going forward. So, 9.7, Dawn asks, what race is that and how did they get from Mars to here? I am Ra. The race is a combination of the mind-body-spirit complexes of those of your so-called red planet, and a careful series of genetical adjustments made by the guardians of that time. These entities arrived, or were preserved, for the experience upon your sphere by a type of birthing which is non-reproductive, but consists of preparing genetic material for the incarnation of the mind-body-spirit complexes of those entities from the red planet. So here Ra is saying that the first genetically manipulated third density entities were not born. For instance, later Ra talks about how fourth density entities are going to be born onto our planet, birthed in a process of gradual dual activation from third, fourth density dual activation till we're finally birthing fully fourth density entities. However, the Guardians came and manipulated Neanderthals, essentially, and then the spirit complexes of the Martians attached to those bodies that were already here. I believe that is what Ra is saying in this quote. And then, of course, eventually they started producing reproductively. But the first time they came, I think their consciousness just attached to the bodies that had been already prepared, and then they started the bisexual reproduction that went on to populate third density. So, 9.8, Dawn asks, then I'm assuming what you're saying is that the Guardians transferred the race here after the race had died from the physical as we know it on Mars. Is that correct? I am Ra. This is correct. Again, Dawn is very much into the concept of moving beings from one planetary sphere to another, and like spaceships and how that might happen. But that isn't what happened. They didn't go and pick up all the Martians and say, hey, it's time to move to Earth before your planet dies. They all died off on their planet, and then they were still in third density, so they had to incarnate somewhere else, because that's what happens when, Mars didn't get to make it into fourth density. They didn't get to run out the hourglass. So those beings moved to our planet, which at that time was second density. The Guardians manipulated genetically some beings to make them more conducive to beings who were later third density. Again, Rod talks about this later. But yeah, they all died off on Mars, and then after some time began incarnating on Earth. So, 9.9. Questioner. The Guardians obviously were acting with an understanding of the Law of One in doing this. Can you explain the application of the Law of One in this process? And so here Dawn's trying to stay on topic as much as possible to make this historical information more philosophical. But it is kind of relevant. It is kind of important to know. I think maybe Rod doesn't agree. I feel like Rod's pretty okay with this line of questioning throughout this session. But yeah, I think it is sort of holistically important to understand that third density was started with infringement upon our third density as we go on to learn about the quarantine and stuff. So this is pretty relevant, even though it is historical information. It's not historical information about the social memory complex, but it's historical information about the beginnings of our third density and the uniqueness of the conditions that brought about third density on Earth. So, I am Ra. The Law of One was named by these guardians as the bringing of the wisdom of the guardians in contact with the entities from the Red Planet, thus melding the social memory complex of the Guardian race and the Red Planet race. It, however, took an increasing amount of distortion into the application of the Law of One from the viewpoint of other guardians, and it is from this beginning action that the quarantine of this planet was instituted, for it was felt that the free will of those of the Red Planet had been abridged. So I think in most cases, again, like when our third density ends on this planet, the harvest isn't going to be very big. Most beings are going to start third density elsewhere. And I think in most cases there isn't the same type of genetic manipulation and interference from higher density beings in that way when a new third density starts. But that's why our planet is quarantined. They made some mistakes. There are no mistakes, but they had some regrets that they needed to alleviate with interventions. So, 9.10. Questioner. Were the entities of the Red Planet following the Law of One prior to leaving the Red Planet? And Ra says, the entities of the Red Planet were attempting to learn the laws of love, which form one of the primal distortions of the Law of One. However, the tendencies of these peoples towards bellicose actions caused such difficulties in the atmospheric environment of their planet that it became inhospitable for third density experience before the end of its cycle. Thus, the Red Planet entities were unharvested and continued in your illusion to attempt to learn the law of love. So, they were third density, they were trying to make it to fourth density, however, they destroyed their atmosphere. Whether that was warfare, whether that was, I would assume it was a combination of the same ways that we have disturbed our own atmosphere, which is warfare, the struggle of, so when a bomb goes off, there's a lot of chemicals and dust and burning of things that causes disturbances in our atmosphere. So that's one way. Another way is the overburning of fossil fuels. And, like on our planet right now, we have like oil fields that are on fire perpetually that just can't go out. That's dumping a lot of things into the atmosphere that's harming the atmosphere. Our deforestation of the planet, that harms our atmosphere because the trees and the green plants help build our atmosphere. And the other various uses where we have harmful chemicals that create atmospheric disturbances also are another way that we harm our own atmosphere. And I'm assuming that Martians did a lot of these things because they're incarnated here now, making some of the same choices and trying to learn from those choices. And so they burned up their atmosphere, and they weren't able then to have life on their planet anymore. And that has always been a potential timeline of our Earth, because, again, we have the Martians here, we have the Maldekians who also destroyed their planet via other means, but, there are timelines where we've done some of the harmful things on our Earth to a larger degree to where the cascading effect isn't able to be stopped. And right now, we are on a threshold. We are really playing with this potential with, increasing all of the methane and all the things that are causing the heating of our planet. And Ra mentions later on that it is the bellicose thought distortions that create an inner heating of the planet. And then that is also because of the actions that we're taking that are manifesting in physical form. So ultimately, if you just amplify what we're doing on Earth here, that's what I would assume happened on Mars, is just too much industrialization, not enough appreciation of the natural world that we've been given, not enough appreciation of the plant life that helps protect and create and regenerate the important gases in our atmosphere and those things. Not to go on a global warming rant or anything like that, but that's my understanding about what happened to Mars, is they did a lot of the things that we know today with our science that are harmful to the atmosphere. But they killed their planet, and now, we can see Mars. We can see what Mars looks like, and it's dead. It's pretty sad. Not as sad as Maldek, I guess, but it's still pretty sad, and it would be very sad if that happened to our very, very beautiful planet, and I hope that that doesn't happen to our very beautiful planet. I don't think it will, but please take a moment to love our natural creation and turn the needle a little bit more in the direction of preserving our biosphere instead of destroying our biosphere. So, 9.11. How long ago did this transfer occur from the red planet to Earth? I am Ra. In your time, this transfer occurred approximately 75000 years ago. So, 75,000 years ago. The beginning of our third density. Here we are wrapping up our third density, trying to move into fourth density. So, about 75,000 years ago they arrived. And 912 Dawn is verifying the number and says 75,000 years ago. And Ra says, I am Ra. This is approximately correct. 913 Questioner. Were there any entities of this form that I am now, 2 arms, 2 legs, on this planet before the transfer occurred? I am Ra. There have been visitors to your sphere at various times for the last 4 million of your years, speaking approximately. These visitors do not affect the cycling of the planetary sphere. It was not third density in its environment until the time previously mentioned. So here Ra is saying that bipedal beings, probably higher density than third, or maybe again some third density beings who had the technology to travel from light years away, were able to walk on Earth before third density started, but that didn't start the clock on third density having those beings come here and visit. It wasn't started until the Guardians brought the Martians here. 914 Questioner. Then there were second density entities here prior to approximately 75,000 years ago. What type of entities were these? And Ra says, the second density is the density of the higher plant life and animal life which exists without the upward drive towards the infinite. These second density beings are of an octave of consciousness, just as you find various orientations of consciousness among the conscious entities of your vibration. So Ra is saying that right before our third density started, there were beings of second density who were of the latest octaves, the latest sub-octaves of second density, with high awareness towards being close to harvesting into third density. And so, presumably, some Earthlings, once that clock struck, once the hourglass was turned, some of those second density entities were ready to be harvested, the ones who were of a late second density suboctave. 916, Dawn asks, where did these beings come from? Were they a product of evolution as is understood by our scientists? Were they evolved from the original material of the Earth that you spoke of? I am Ra. This is correct. So, here Ra's just kind of validating that our theory of evolution is pretty much true, and also validating that our theory of the quote-unquote missing link is also true. So, 917, Questioner. Do these beings then evolve from second density to third density? I am Ra. This is correct, although no guarantee can be made of the number of cycles it will take an entity to learn the lessons of consciousness of self, which are the prerequisite for transition to third density. So second density doesn't have the same kind of clock that third density has. It's just a matter of when these entities become self-aware enough to be able to wield a spirit complex. Because Ra talks about how moving from density to density is really just about how much of the light of intelligent infinity that one is able to integrate. So once these beings become aware enough, self-aware enough, then they start their third density cycles. And again, there's no clock, there's no time, there's no timer. It happens when it happens. So 9.18, Dawn asks, is there any particular race of people on our planet now who were incarnated here from second density? I am Ra. There are no second density consciousness complexes here on your sphere at this time. However, there are two races which use the second density form. One is the entities of the planetary sphere you call Maldek. These entities are working their understanding complexes through a series of what you would call karmic restitutions. They dwell within your deeper underground passageways and are known to you as Bigfoot. The other race is that being offered a dwelling in this density by guardians who wish to give the mind-body-spirit complexes of those who are of this density at this time appropriately engineered physical vehicles, as you would call these chemical complexes, in the event that there is what you would call nuclear war. Okay, so here Ra is talking about third density consciousness within second density bodies. And one of those occurrences is the Maldekians, who have come here and to alleviate their karma from having destroyed their planet, are in diminished bodies with diminished consciousness potentials. And Ross says these are Bigfoot that we have seen. Those are Maldekians who are undergoing karmic restitution for their actions. But then we also have another type of second density beings apparently inhabited by third density consciousness. And they have been brought here also by the guardians, or genetically manipulated by the guardians, so that we have a genetic line that we can incarnate into if we destroy our third density via nuclear war. So ultimately, if we had a nuclear war, the human bodies that we know and love to hate and hate to love won't be compatible with the distortions created by those nuclear blasts. However, dwelling underground, we do have bodies that would be capable of that. And so those bodies would then be what we used to incarnate into to finish out our third density, potentially, on a certain timeline where that was possible, where we had just enough nuclear war to destroy the potential for physical bodies, but not so much nuclear war that it destroyed our entire planet, so that we could still have incarnations, we could still work to repair those choices that we had made at the end of this cycle. So, 919, Dawn asks, I didn't understand what these vehicles or beings were for that were appropriate in the event of nuclear war. I am Ra. These are beings which exist as instinctual second density beings which are being held in reserve to form what you would call a gene pool in case these body complexes are needed. These body complexes are greatly able to withstand the rigors of radiation, which the body complexes you now inhabit could not do. So that's pretty much what I had said. They're being held in reserve so that we have bodies to incarnate into if we destroy the potential for humans to live on Earth, but we still have an Earth to live on. Dawn asks 9.20, where are these body complexes located? I am Ra. These body complexes of the second race dwell in uninhabited deep forest. There are many in various places over the surface of your planet. Dawn asks, are they Bigfoot-type creatures? And Ra says, I am Ra. This is correct, although we would not call these Bigfoot, as they are scarce and are very able to escape detection. The first race is less able to be aware of proximity of other mind-body-spirit complexes, but these beings are very able to escape due to their technological understandings before their incarnations here. These entities of the glowing eyes are the most familiar to your peoples. So again, this is implying that these beings are originally from a third density that gained advanced technological understanding and then are therefore able to perceive the proximity of any humans that might see them and escape undetected long before a human would set eyes on them. Whereas the Maldeckian Bigfoots aren't quite as aware. That's why sometimes we see them. But Ra does say that we might see glowing eyes in the dark, obviously, and those might potentially be a sighting of this second type of second density creature. 9.22, Dawn asks, then there are 2 different types of Bigfoot, correct? I am Ra. This will be the final question. There are 3 types of Bigfoot, if you will accept that vibratory sound complex used for 3 such different races of mind, body, spirit complexes. The first 2 we have described. The third is a thought form. So, essentially what they're saying here is that some people hallucinate a Bigfoot sighting, and that would be the thought form type of Bigfoot. There are the Maldeckian Bigfoots, which is what traditionally we have considered a Bigfoot. There are the much less likely to be seen second type of Bigfoot that maybe have been witnessed having glowing eyes in the deep forest. And then the third type of Bigfoot is a thought form. They aren't actually incarnated beings on this planet living a physical experience. So, the last question, 9.23, Dawn asks, we plan to do a second session later today if the instrument is capable, and I'd like to ask, believe this is possible, and also if there is anything we can do to aid the instrument's comfort. I am Ra. The instrument will require some adjustment of the tender portions of her body complex. The distortions are due to the energy center blockage you would call pineal. I leave you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one Creator. Adonai. So here Dawn is just affirming that they can have another session today and asking about Carla and how she's doing. And Ra says she will require some adjustment of the tender portions of her body complex. I'm assuming they're just referring to the portions of her body complex that are typically tender after one of these sessions, which is usually like her neck and shoulders are what are really bothering her after laying still in this position for so long. She has rheumatoid arthritis, so just being immobile, completely immobile for such a long period of time without a consciousness in her body, able to make even minor adjustments in her joints and her tendons and all that stuff, really was difficult for her in a lot of ways. And Ross says the distortions are due to the energy center blockage you would call pineal, which is, her third eye, the indigo ray. Carla had her own series of distortions. If you know Carla well, then you know this information, but Carla was very much willing to give of herself unto depletion, and this is because of some unworthiness distortions that she was dealing with, and an inability to accept her own creatorhood of her experience. She much more leaned into the overactivity of her green ray, where she was just willing to give and give and give to other people to make other people happy. She's said many times before that when she would lay down to go into a raw session, especially as the sessions accumulated, she was fully prepared to die. She was prepared to die on that table for Dawn because she loved Dawn so much, and nothing made Dawn happy in the whole time that she knew him, except for being able to talk to Ra. So she was willing to lay down her life in service to Dawn because this is what made Dawn happy, and she'd just never seen him so happy as when they were having the Ra contact. So this sort of deference to Dawn's needs over her own needs is what was contributing to this blockage. Her willingness to go further than was appropriate with her energy expenditure in these sessions. Eventually Ra is able to sort of talk it out with Dawn in a way where they work to cut Carla off before she uses all of her energy, but she was just so open when she would lay down and go into trance. She just literally put everything she had on the table. And so it was hard for for Ra to balance her own free will choice in doing that with their desire to not take her life through this service of hers. So this is something that Carla struggles with for most of the contact, and honestly probably for a lot of the rest of her life. For the nitty-gritty details, Carla, when she was a child, her parents were very hard on her. She worked very hard to do the right thing, to be of service, to be cheerful. She had a disabled little brother who she spent a lot of time taking care of even when she was very, very little. And her parents still always had a harsh word to say, a critical word to say, and very little gratitude for what this little creature was giving to them to make their lives easier. And so for Carla, her distortion was tangible service. She could, if she cleaned the toilet, even if nobody said thank you, or if somebody even criticized her for how she did it, she knew that she still performed a service. The toilet was dirty, now it's clean. That's an objective, tangible thing that she could see that she had done with her body. This, however, was a distortion of the indigo ray, which is an understanding that your service doesn't have to be something that's physically manifested in that way. That the highest potential service is the balance of your beingness. And so it was very hard for her to accept that even when she wasn't doing something, her vibration was still a service. She wanted to see the tangible results of her service, and so she was willing to give of herself beyond her capacity to serve. And again, this is just rooted in the green ray, and Ra talks about this later even very specifically, that she had an overactive green ray and a very dim indigo ray. And this was something that she could have worked on, and I'm sure she did work on it, but it was something that was very difficult for her to get past, even through the rest of her life. She was someone who wanted to do, she wanted to get her hands dirty to serve others, but she pushed herself too far in those desires. So, just a warning for any of you out there who may feel similar compulsions of unworthiness and a desire to manifest service in a way that you can look at and see as objective, to know that you're performing. If you're giving of yourself beyond your capacity and you're feeling the effects of distortions in your body, ill health, pain, these kinds of things, just have a lot more compassion for yourself. Have compassion for yourself in the way that you would for Carla. When you would see Carla, if you would see Carla trying to do the dishes even though her shoulders were hurting because she just was trying to feel productive and helpful, and you would probably step in and say, "Hey Carla, please let me do the dishes instead." Give yourself the same amount of grace that you would give somebody else that you see pushing themselves beyond their capacity, even if it brings them joy to serve, because that was the hard part for her, was letting go of the joy that she felt in serving that way, and understanding that she could still feel joy just in her own beingness, just in who she was. But very difficult lesson. Not easy for any of us. So I wish all of you luck in whatever lessons that you are struggling to integrate at this time space, because we all have a list that we could write down, and some items we wouldn't even be able to conceptualize into words and put on our list. We're all learning and we're all growing, but just remember that you too are the creator, and your experience of yourself is important regardless of how other people perceive you. And thank you for listening, and thank you for those of you who have come forward and given me feedback, and those of you who have even joined our Discord group. That's really fun and cool. I'm really excited about that, and I'm excited for the next time I get to sit down and record another session to share with everybody. So I will also offer thanks to the creator for these experiences that we get to share with each other, and for the communion that we get to feel in sharing these teachings instead of just trying to figure it all out inside of our own heads. We get to bounce these ideas off of each other and see what actually works for us to integrate. So I appreciate all of you, and I will see you next time.